The office was always too quiet. That was the first thing Amanda noticed, and it never stopped being the first thing she noticed. It was a silence that felt expensive, curated, like the plush grey carpet and the abstract art that seemed to be nothing but angry blue squiggles. It absorbed sound, including the scream that had been living in her chest for the better part of 2 years. Jason, her husband, had been the one to suggest therapy. Just to talk to someone, he'd said, his voice a careful monotone over his morning espresso. You've seemed so distant lately, Mandy. It's like you're not even here. The irony was a bitter pill. He was the one who was never here, his presence reduced to the scent of his cologne on the pillow and the scheduled, perfunctory texts checking if he should have the sushi or the Thai delivered for dinner. So, she went, not for him, but because the silence in their sleek, minimalist apartment had begun to echo, and she was afraid of what it might say back. Dr. Alistair Vance didn't look like a movie therapist. He was in his late 40s, with kind, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that didn't seem practiced. He didn't sit behind a massive desk but in an armchair identical to the one he offered her, angled towards the large window that overlooked a small, healing garden. Amanda, he'd said in their first session, his voice a low, steady rumble. This time is for you. Not for Jason, not for your marriage as he defines it, for you. What do you feel? No one had asked her that in a very, very long time. At first, the words came out in rusty, broken fragments. She talked about the loneliness, the feeling of being a beautifully staged mannequin in the life Jason had designed, a life of charity galas, strategic networking, and a perfectly calibrated absence of passion. She talked about her abandoned photography, how her camera now gathered dust in a closet, its lens cap on like a closed eye. She talked about the crushing politeness of their interactions, a suffocating blanket that smothered any genuine emotion. Dr. Vance, Alistair, as he asked her to call him after a few sessions, listened. He didn't just nod, he heard. He reflected her words back to her, not as an echo, but as a clarified stream, helping her see the contours of her own unhappiness. It sounds like you feel erased, he said once, and the word was so devastatingly accurate she had to fight back tears. He saw the woman buried under the wife. The turning point came during a session about her parents, about their own cold, pragmatic marriage. She was crying, frustrated, feeling childish for the tears. Alistair didn't hand her a tissue from the box on the table between them. He quietly stood, walked over, and knelt beside her chair, offering the tissue in his hand. His closeness wasn't intrusive, it was an anchor. As she took it, her fingers brushed against his. A simple, accidental touch. But in the sterile emotional landscape of her life, it was a lightning strike, a jolt of pure, unmediated human connection. She looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a fraction of a second, the professional veil slipped. She saw not just empathy, but a shared, profound understanding of loneliness. He looked away first, clearing his throat and returning to his chair, but the air had been irrevocably charged. The sessions became the center of her universe. She lived from Tuesday to Tuesday, from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. She started dressing differently for them, not in her usual designer athleisure, but in soft blouses, a subtle spritz of a new perfume. She was excavating herself, and with every revealed layer, she felt more seen by him. The transference, a concept he had gently outlined early on, was explained as a natural part of the process. But this didn't feel like a projection. It felt terrifyingly real. It was after a session where she'd finally articulated her desire to leave Jason, to reclaim her life, that he broke protocol. As she stood to leave, vibrating with a fearful exhilaration, he said, "Amanda, wait." He took a deep breath, a conflict playing out on his face. "What you're planning, it takes immense courage, more than most people have. I admire you for it." Then he added, so softly she almost didn't hear, "Too much, perhaps." The next week, his usual receptionist was gone. "Family emergency," Alistair explained, a slight strain in his voice. The session was electric, filled with long, loaded glances and conversations that danced on the edge of the professional abyss. At the end, as she walked to the door, he was there, closer than he should have been. "I shouldn't say this," he whispered, his breath stirring her hair, "but I think about our conversations long after you've gone." That was the seed. The affair didn't begin with a kiss in his office. It began with an email from a new, anonymous account she just knew was his. "The coffee at the quiet corner on Elm is as good as they say. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. It was a Wednesday, not her day. She went. He was there, in a corner booth, out of his therapist's uniform, wearing a simple navy sweater. He looked vulnerable, human. "I've resigned from the practice," he said without preamble. "Effective the end of the month. My colleague, Dr. Evans, will take over your case. I've already arranged it, ethically. But I couldn't. I can't be your therapist anymore. Then what can you be? Amanda asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. His hand reached across the table, covering hers. Whatever you'll let me. The first time they made love was in a nondescript hotel room miles from the city. It wasn't just physical, it was a frantic, desperate conversation of touch, a validation of every feeling he had helped her unearth. In his arms, the scream in her chest finally dissolved, not into silence, but into a cry of release that was met with equal fervor. He worshipped her, her mind, her body, the scars on her knee from a childhood fall, everything Jason had ignored for years. Alistair made her feel not just seen, but celebrated. She began the painful, meticulous process of leaving Jason. With Alistair as her secret strategist and emotional pillar, she consulted a lawyer, started separating finances, and found a small apartment. To Jason, she simply became more engaged, which he accepted with a satisfied nod, believing his therapy prescription was working. The deception was a sour note, but Alistair soothed it away. "This is for your survival," he'd murmur into her hair as they lay tangled in the anonymous sheets. "Soon, we won't have to hide." The cracks appeared slowly, almost imperceptibly. He never let her see where he lived. "A messy divorce of my own," he explained. "It's safer this way." His phone was always face down, and he'd occasionally vanish for days with only a terse text about a family emergency. The equal, empathetic listener from the therapy room began to subtly shift. He became more opinionated, more directive. When she expressed doubt about taking a larger financial settlement from Jason, Alistair grew firm. "After what he's put you through, take everything. He doesn't deserve your guilt." It sounded like empowerment, but it carried a new, unfamiliar edge. The climax came the day she signed the divorce papers. She was free. She raced to their usual hotel, bursting to share the news, to finally begin their real life. He was already there, pacing. Before she could speak, he grabbed her, his kiss hungry, possessive. "Now you're mine," he breathed, the words hot against her neck. A chill trickled down her spine. They had never spoken in terms of ownership. Later, as he slept, his phone on the nightstand buzzed insistently. A notification lit up the screen. Reminder, session with J. Smith 10 a.m. tomorrow. A professional reminder app for a session tomorrow. Her blood ran cold. He had resigned. He'd told her he'd left the practice. She stared at his sleeping face, the kind, understanding face of the man who had saved her. A terrible, icy clarity began to dawn. She slid out of bed, her hands trembling. With a feather-light touch, she picked up his phone. It was unlocked. Her heart stopped. She didn't go to his call log or messages first. She went to his email. There, she found the sent folder. Dozens of emails, over many months, to a Dr. Evans, his former colleague, reports, patient summaries. And there, near the top, was one with the subject line, "Amanda C. Update and continued co-therapy." With a stomach lurching into her throat, she opened it. Per our arrangement, Amanda's dependency has deepened appropriately. She has finalized the divorce, securing significant assets as we discussed. The transition from therapeutic guidance to a personal relationship is complete, and she is fully enmeshed. I believe the next phase, introducing the idea of joint investment in the venture we discussed, can begin. Her capital is now accessible. Her emotional state remains pliant and trusting. Will continue to guide the narrative. Alistair. The words swam before her eyes. Co-therapy, dependency, assets, pliant and trusting. The plush carpet, the kind eyes, the careful questions, the rescue, the affair. Every single moment, recontextualized with surgical, horrifying precision. It was all a script. A long, calculated con. He hadn't fallen for her. He had fished for her. Jason's dismissive neglect had made her the perfect target, a wealthy, emotionally starved woman, primed for a savior. Alistair and his colleague had seen her coming a mile away. She placed the phone back exactly as it was. The silence in the room was no longer expensive or curated. It was the silence of a vacuum, of absolute zero, sucking the warmth and life from her very soul. She dressed mechanically, each piece of clothing feeling like a shroud. She looked at the man in the bed, the architect of her awakening and now her utter destruction. He had sent her to therapy to fix the wife who was distant. In doing so, he had delivered her, perfectly packaged, to a predator. She didn't slam the door on her way out. She closed it with a soft, definitive click. The scream was back in her chest, bigger and more silent than ever. But this time, it wasn't born of loneliness. It was born of a knowledge so vile it threatened to unmake her, the most intimate relationship of her life, the cornerstone of her rebirth, had been a billable hour, and the price had been everything she was. The cool evening air hit her face as she stepped onto the street. She had no apartment key yet. Her things were still at Jason's. She had nowhere to go. She started walking, the lights of the city blurring into streaks of meaningless color. The therapy had been a lie. The affair had been a lie. Her liberation had been a lie, orchestrated to transfer her from one man's gilded cage to another's far more cunning trap. She walked for hours, numb, until her feet ached. Finally, she found herself outside the public library. She went in, found a secluded computer terminal, and logged into an old, forgotten email account. She began to type, her fingers moving with a calm she did not feel. She typed to the state licensing board. She typed to the ethics committee of the American Psychological Association. She typed every detail, every date, every quote from that damning email. She attached the photos she had secretly taken of the email on his phone. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about a warning. It was about ensuring no other Amanda would ever walk into that quiet, expensive office with the angry blue paintings. As she hit send on the final, most important email, she felt a shiver.